Thank you for checking out Grayscale LA. My name is Alex Narvaez, and I'm the producer of this series and the videos you'll be seeing on this channel. So let's jump right into it. What is Grayscale LA and why does it matter? I think in order for me to give you the proper context, I gotta share a bit of my journey with you because this project is really closely tied to my own personal journey. So let's start with some key dates. Today, if you're watching this on the day that I published this, which is January 22nd, 2026, today is my birthday. So if you feel so inclined to do something nice for my birthday, it would mean the world to me if you would, drop a comment and give this video a like, and if you would subscribe to this channel, because I genuinely and truly am pouring everything into this new chapter and really trying to bring, some incredible stories to you. So it would mean the world to have your support. So I'll start off by saying that. This being a very special milestone, being my 40th birthday, the big 40, it comes with a lot of feelings, a lot of emotions. And I guess if I have to, pick an emotion, pick a feeling that I'm living in this new chapter, I gotta say, honestly, is gratitude. Gratitude that I've made it this far. Gratitude that I'm still strong and healthy, gratitude that I've built a beautiful life with my beautiful wife, Tiffany, and being able to experience fatherhood. My baby boy, Apollo, just turned 9 months this week. And using the skills and the talents that God has given me to build a career doing what I love, right? I would say like all of that encapsulates just gratitude for me. So that's the feeling and the emotion that I'm living in and that I'm producing in, now. And on the note of my career, I would also say, talking about milestones, 2026 not only is a big year because it's my 40th birthday, but it also marks 20 years exactly since I started my very first radio show. So it's 20 years of my entire professional career as an anniversary this year too. So it's a big time, and I think we'll do a bit of a recap of some of the work that I've done, and we could start there, right? So like 2006, was my first year of university. I went to TMU, which is the Toronto Metropolitan University, and at the time I was producing my first radio show out of the SpiritLive.net facility. And looking back at that facility now, man, that facility was like really ahead of its time. Like beautiful facility out of the Rogers Communication Center in Toronto. And it was fully equipped with video, audio. It had a live switchboard, and it was an internet radio station. So basically people would tune in live and they would get a video feed and an audio feed of everything that I was doing in the studio at that time. It's essentially what podcasting is today. It's essentially what live streaming is today. So I'm very proud to say that I'm an early adopter of podcasting, since 2006. So that's a big part of my journey. That's where I started. That's where I really learned how to produce, how to tell stories that resonated with an audience, and really how to have conversations that were impactful with guests, right? So that's where I learned all of that stuff early on in my career. And then, I jumped into media and entertainment the traditional way. After university, I started interning at the CBC, and I worked my way up, right? I'm happy to say that I know all the steps of production because of the route that I took. So I went into the CBC as an intern, then I worked my way up to a PA, then I worked my way up to a visual researcher, then I became a shooter, and eventually I was directing and producing, right? So my career has been just so fulfilling. Like I've had the opportunity to work with some incredible networks, CBC, TSN, MTV, BET, Toronto International Film Festival. Like I've had the opportunity to create some really cool content for some incredible platforms. And I'm shooting this live downtown LA, by the way. So like there's no editing. You hear that siren. I'm in the hustle and bustle of the city. So this is where I'm living and breathing, and this is where I'll be creating a lot of the stuff. So if you hear sirens, if you hear traffic, if you hear horns and stuff in the background, I'm downtown LA. This is where I'm shooting. And I guess if I had to like pick a highlight or a couple of highlights from my career, I would say my time at the Strombo show was definitely a time where I felt like really connected to the stuff that we were creating. And it just reminded me of why I fell in love with media in the first place, right? We would have world-class artists come into this really intimate, small space and just have them perform. And that show was really just about capturing the energy and the performance and the interviews and the storytelling of the talent that would come in. So I directed and produced like over 100 sessions for House of Strombo, which was on Apple Music and on CBC Music. So that was a really memorable time for me. I really enjoyed that series. And then, after a few years, Complex Canada came, and that was a huge full circle moment for me where I took all of the learnings that I had and experience that I had in radio with interviewing talent and having conversations, and all of the experience that I had as a producer and director, and it all came together in one job essentially, where I was directing and producing content. And after winning a few awards and for the work that I was doing and stuff, I ended up landing my own show, which was One by One with Alex Narvaez on Complex. And that show was really special to me. That's a dream come true, to be able to like grow up reading a magazine, and like Mark Echo was the founder of that magazine as well, and I grew up wearing Echo and stuff. So fast forward in my career to end up having my own series on Complex, that's just a dream come true. And that show was really special because I got to sit down with some amazing people in chairs just like this and have really, really awesome conversations. Some of it was fun and like fluff, but we also would dive into like deeper stuff that was beyond the headlines, right? So that's what I really loved about that opportunity. And I would say at that time in my career, that just opened up so many doors for me to start hosting panels and conversations with some incredible people outside of Complex as well. And my career just kept going in that direction. And I think at some point, I started to feel like I was hitting a glass ceiling, like I wanted to just create so much stuff. And if you know me, I love to execute. I love to conceptualize ideas, come up with segments, come up with ideas, and just be able to like move on them and create. And sometimes when you work for these big companies, and this is not a shot at these companies because I feel honored and blessed that I was able to create cool stuff for them and with them, right? But sometimes when you work in these big companies and organizations, there's just a lot of red tape. I'm sure a lot of creatives who work in media can, relate to this, but there's a lot of red tape. There has to be levels of approvals sometimes to get stuff done. And I just started to feel, like I was hitting a glass ceiling, and having conversations with other peers and stuff about ownership of content and how that's really important. We're telling all these stories of our culture, right? And sometimes you look at the ownership of these stories and it's like, who owns this content? Like, I'm the one creating it, pouring my soul and energy into the stuff I'm making. And at the end of the day, I'm not necessarily the owner of this stuff. So conversations around ownership became really important. And then also conversations around independent media became really important too for me, where I started to look at like, what independent media exists, like what platforms exist that are not, necessarily driven by ad dollars and things like that. And nothing's wrong with that, but it's also important to have like independent media, right? So all of these conversations and ideas were floating around in my mind. And right at that time, God blessed me with like this incredible opportunity where I felt like I wanted to do more. I didn't quite know how. And a sponsor that I was working with at the time, they reached out to me and they saw the interviews and conversations that I was producing in the Canadian media landscape. And they reached out to me and they were like, hey, Alex, what if, you had your own series that you own and we put some money behind it, we become the title sponsor for your series. is that something you would be interested in? And my mind was blown at the time, just because it just seemed like such an incredible opportunity. But also, there's the fear of leaving like a full-time job and the job security that comes with that. So I had to put some thought into it. Ultimately, I chose to bet on myself, and I took that opportunity. And I have to say that was a life-changing opportunity for so many reasons, right? Like, number one, that's how my series One Boro was born. And that series honestly was so special to me because it was kind of a continuation of another project I was working on at the time that I had created with my friend Sid, called Scarborough Made. And Scarborough Made was a project, it was kind of like a documentary project where we would go around our hometown of Scarborough and feature different stories with portraiture work. And it was just like a really, it was a passion project that turned into so much more. And I wanted to honor that project by continuing that idea of just storytelling with community. So One Boro was essentially me paying homage to another project Scarborough Made. And I was able to build this series with the support of this sponsor, who I'm forever grateful to, right? And I had some incredible conversations. I ended up shooting a full season, 13 episodes, sitting down with some of Toronto's legends, right? So that series was really special to me. I produced that independently, and I got paid to do it. And I was, that was my full-time job, was really just creating my own series and working on that full-time. And that was a dream come true for me. So I'm so grateful for that experience. But then it's funny, the way that life works, because, that show was doing so well. It had the respect of the guests that were coming in. My peers who are in that space were shouting me out for what I was able to do independently. And my sponsor, who was paying for everything, was also really happy, right? We were already starting to talk about season 2 and how to get that off the ground. But in the background, I had started to work on getting into the U.S., right? To get my visa to come to the U.S. full time and live out here and work out here. And the thing is, my wife, Tiff, she was already out here in L.A. Working in fashion, and she's been killing it. She's on fire. But so I put in my application, pre-pandemic. So like, put in my application, then the pandemic happens. And because of the pandemic and all this stuff, my application just took really long to get processed and approved. So I'm in this limbo state for 5 years of like, hurry up and wait, not knowing if or when I was going to get approved to come down to live and work in the US, right? So it just so happens that at the height of One Boro, we're just banged out season 1, I get approval to come to the US. So, my visa comes in. And now I'm faced with this like huge decision, right? It's like, do I leave the security of this amazing opportunity that I've had to build my own series, in Toronto, and do it the way I want with the support of this great sponsor, just like this great setup? Or do I come down to LA, start from scratch, start over again? So I'm processing all of that. And literally 3 days after finding out that I was approved for my visa, we find out that we're pregnant. So I'm like, oh my God, like the decisions were it was just so much to process, right? Ultimately, I decided to, bet on myself again and come out to LA, start from scratch, do the whole thing. And I have to say, 2025 last year, was a blur. But before I even get into that, I will say we're talking about I was talking about milestones earlier. This is my 40th birthday. It's a 20-year anniversary of me being in media and entertainment since I started my career. And also January marks 1 year of me living in LA full time. So the timing of this episode is very intentional. There's just so many milestones I wanted to release at this time. But going back to 2025 when I moved out here, the first part of the year was just a blur, right? Packing up my entire life, and moving to a new country, to a new city, figuring out all the logistics that come with that, prepping for a baby. It was just literally a blur, right? But I will say, I think the big pivotal moment for me was when my son Apollo was born. So in April of 2025, my son was born. And, all parents say this. All parents say it's a life-changing experience. And it is, right? Of course. I'm sure all parents feel like that. But aside from the fact that, your child is born, you also start to get introspective and you start to think about, like, what matters, like what conversations matter, what about my career matters, what is it about what I do that really matters, right? So I took some time to really just sit and think about, what do I want to do with the rest of my life, with the rest of my professional career, with my journey. I mean, I've had such a great run up until that point, but I found that, like, this new chapter of my life, I just started to think about, like, what am I leaving behind for my son? At some point, Apollo is going to want to look at some of the work that I've done, right? And I'm proud of everything I've done. But I want to leave behind something with substance, conversations for him to learn from him to take away from, and just a legacy project for him to look back on and be like, wow, my pops was really having, really great conversations that were moving the needle and that mattered. So I think getting into that state of mind, that's really where Grayscale LA was born. I also started to think about what genuinely brings me joy, right? Sometimes when you're working in a career for so long, it's a blessing that I've had a career spanning this long and that I jumped into what I love to do and made a career out of it so early in my life. But after 20 years, if you don't focus on creating things that you feel passionate about, it can feel stale, right? So, I've had the opportunity to create for so many clients and networks. And at some point, you just start to feel like, I want to create something that matters to me, right? I want to push conversations that matter. And sometimes when you work for these companies, like, sometimes there were artists that I wanted to push or stories that I wanted to, get on some of these platforms. And I understand their perspective. They would say, you know what, this story is cool, but, like, they don't have a big following. This isn't going to get a lot of views. Or sometimes, being, a proud Latino, I'm Salvadoreño, I wanted to push forward Latin stories, right? Latino stories. And I just felt like it was always pulling teeth to have to do those kinds of things, right? I really want to create a space for Latino and BIPOC stories where we could share our narrative and share our stories, share our learnings. So I'm approaching this project from the lens of being a father, right? Like, what stories am I leaving behind for my son that he could learn from, right? I'm approaching it from the perspective of reconnecting with my roots and my culture, right? I'm a proud Salvadoreño. I was born in San Salvador, raised in Toronto, and now I live in Los Angeles. So even the story, the immigrant story and the immigrant journey is a big part of my identity, right? Immigrating to Canada, then immigrating to the US while carrying my, Salvadoran heritage with me. That's something that I'm really proud of. And it's something that I also want my son to identify with, being proud of his culture. So, approaching it from that lens and diving into spirituality is another big theme for me in this new chapter of my life that I want to explore through these conversations too. I grew up in a Christian home, so I always had some understanding of what that means even to my family, right? But it wasn't until much later in my life that I had, like, a hunger and an appetite to learn more of what that means and, like, dive into spirituality and what that means to me. So again, from the lens of a father, when conversations about spirituality come up, I want to be able to share wisdom with him. So the best way that I learn is talking to people. That's the best way that I've always learned. So I want to have conversations with my guests, interesting people, also about spirituality, understand what it means to them. How do they practice spirituality? What does that mean, right? So have these great conversations, and leave them all for my son to one day, learn from. So this series really is a blend of everything I've learned over the course of my life and my career, and it's a layered project, right? I would also say aesthetically, as you can see, this is, the aesthetic of this series is black and white. That's me paying homage to Scarborough Made. And if you know my work, I love the black and white aesthetic. I've used it in Scarborough Made. I've used it in House of Strombo. I've used it in Scarborough, in Everyday Lords editorials, right? It's just the black and white aesthetic for me is just so beautiful. So the name Grayscale LA really speaks to the duality, thematically and aesthetically of what we'll be covering in this series, right? I mean, it's really about the space in between cultures, in between success and struggle, in between who you are right now and who you have the potential to become. That's always what I'm chasing. I'm always chasing to be the best version of myself, to reach my full potential every day. And that's really all you could do, is just take it day by day, right? So if you've ever felt like you don't quite fit in a box, if you're chasing something bigger, trying to redefine what success looks like for you, trying to figure it out still, this series is for you. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I really look forward to sharing more stories and interviews with you. I hope that you stick around for the ride. Please make sure you subscribe, like this video, drop a comment. This is Grayscale LA. I'm your boy Alex. Peace.